unfreedom in the market for money also afflicts social morality. Because as Rothbard said, to be moral, an act must be free. Free actions can come only from sovereign individuals. Sovereignty itself, the word, refers to the locus of supreme power in the sphere of human action. Very simply, sovereignty refers to your ability to act in the world as you see fit. And according to natural law, sovereignty inheres within the individual, as each person must consciously decide what actions to take, regardless of what forces they face in the world. And so in this sense, an inner sanctum of sovereignty's generative source lives within all of us in this inviolable space called the Logos. And the Logos is a Greek word that actually means word or ratio. And the Logos is the defining feature of humanity, our ability to tell and believe stories like money, nation states, human rights. This is what separates man from animal. And at the foundation of Western civilization today is the precept that the sovereignty of the individual is held higher than the sovereignty of the state. And this is an embodied belief in principles such as habeas corpus, the presumption of innocence until proven guilty, and freedom of speech rights. And as George Orwell once said, if liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. An inability to speak the truth with words or to prove others wrong in the marketplace with prices is the death of liberty. As the 20th century so painfully taught us, restricting the Logos is a slippery slope toward totalitarianism. Again, free expression in all forms is antecedent to proper moral action. So money chosen on the free market is a form of speech in and unto itself. Some people call it the language of value, right? So gold, for instance, was an expression of the collective Logos, in that it was a tool freely chosen for its monetary properties, not something imposed upon people. And in this sense, gold was a moral money because it was freely chosen. People were choosing the tool that best served them. And to comprehend money's impact on morality, let's consider the hypothetical case of a winemaker living in a centrally banked economy. So if a winemaker knows that a central bank just doubled the money supply to save the economy, he now faces three choices. He could continue selling his wine for $20 a bottle, taking a 50% loss in post-inflation dollars. He could water down his wine or use cheaper ingredients, sell his customer an inferior product. Or he could increase the price of his wine to $40 to maintain the quality of his wine and his margin in post-inflation dollars. So if a winemaker chooses to water down his wine, he's defrauding his customers, right? He's selling them an inferior product. If instead he decides to be honest and double his price to maintain his quality and margin, he faces competition from other winemakers that are less scrupulous, that would be willing to compromise on quality. And since diluting wine with water is difficult to detect and offers an immediate financial gain, all winemakers in this situation face strong incentives to defraud their customers, basically. And when inflation strikes. So in a similar vein, monetary inflation incentivizes sellers across all industries to deceive their customers in the short run. So in this sense, inflation imposes the temptation of larceny onto sellers' hearts, forcing them to weigh their financial well-being against their moral integrity. And in this way, inflation is an infectious disease on society's moral fabric. Inflation-resistant money, then, is an antidote to an afflicted social morality. And in this sense, Bitcoin, the only money with a 0% terminal inflation rate in history, is an antidote to this moral affliction. And inflation really is, it's just the installation of theft directly into our primary trust network, which is money. There's no equitable benefit to it whatsoever, despite all the Keynesian bullshit you may have heard. And, frankly, it's a mechanism for time theft, so it's an invisible form of slavery. And to quantify this modern form of invisible slavery, let's look at a more ancient form of visible slavery. So in ancient Egypt, Herodotus wrote that a single Great Pyramid required 100,000 men laboring for 20 years straight to construct. So again, if we assume each slave was working about 5,000 hours, that comes out to 10 billion human hours to build each Great Pyramid. But this is still less than the time stolen by the greatest pyramid schemes in history, fiat currencies. Fiat currencies are pyramid schemes erected by central banks that restrict access to and suppress the price of gold, which would otherwise outcompete their inferior monies in the marketplace. It may be hard to believe that the US dollar is a pyramid scheme, but I think its symbology tells its own story. So the pinnacle of the US dollar pyramid scheme is gold, a tool selected as money by the cumulative free choice or the collective logos of entrepreneurs throughout history. Gold was abstracted into paper money to make it more transactable, not to replace it. Over time, as many of us know, the option to redeem US dollars for gold was revoked, which basically gave the US government full control over currency scarcity and gave them an unlimited ability to confiscate wealth and time at their discretion. So to quantify the central banking system of time theft, let's take a close look at the Fed, which is the central bank of the earth. By dividing the growth in US dollar supply by the average annual wage rate, we calculate a proxy for the hours stolen from society through US M2 supply expansion. Stealing an average of 7.6% working hours per year since 1981, the Fed has managed to scalp nearly 1 trillion hours off the backs of hardworking people in 40 years. Assuming that each person works an average of 2,000 hours per year, this is equivalent to enslaving 11.7 million people for 40 years straight. This implicit taxation via inflation is in addition to all the explicit taxes we also pay, by the way. Time stolen by the Fed since 1981 is 341% more than the transatlantic slave trade per year. With 23.4 billion hours stolen annually, the Fed could theoretically build 2.3 Great Pyramids every year with that slave labor force. And in terms of absolute human time stolen each year, fiat currency is the largest pyramid scheme and institution of slavery in human history. So, when we stop conceiving of central banking as an economic story and start to consider it as a crime story, we're beginning to get the true picture. Like counterfeit agri-beads and panos, counterfeit dollars are also used to mobilize military efforts, which before fiat required explicit taxation and borrowing to finance. Indeed, fiat currency has been the stealth funding source for evil for a long time. It has funded every dictator, world war, and internment camp in history. In the 20th century alone, fiat currency-funded governments murdered over 169 million people in a modern-day mega-atrocity we call democide. History's clear. The enforced enactment of a fiat currency lie worldwide leads to loss of life on a monstrous scale. Said simply, central banking is fraud, and those that remain silent on this truth are complicit in its criminality. Or, as one of my favorite authors, Taleb, says, quote, "If you see a fraud and do not say a fraud, you are a fraud," unquote.